All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's edition of NASCAR 07 on the channel. As today we are racing for the NASCAR Busch Series, and it is going to be another custom schedule season race. Today we are at the Milwaukee Mile for our 7th race of 30 on the season for the running of the AT&T 250. It's going to be one of the longer Busch Series races of the season, so a little bit of an earlier start time here for this one. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will be starting at the back of the field. No practice, no qualifying for today's race, and it could be a struggle. We struggled in the Truck Series race here. Really didn't break inside the top 10 the entire race. I don't think I even ran a lap inside the top 10. We struggled to run top 15 on speed, and we ended up finishing 25th. Hopefully we have more speed today with Jimmie Johnson. He comes in third in the point standings through the first 6 completed races. And into race 7, maybe, just maybe, has a shot to take the points lead. But he's going to have, again, that work cut out for him here today. Not sure who is on the pole. Looks like Greg Biffle will be on the pole for tonight's race. The green flag is in the air. We are racing at the Milwaukee Mile. Gonna have to get a feel of what this race car will feel like for Jimmie Johnson in the early going. He's gonna run at the back for right now. It's a long race. Truck Series race here was 200 laps. This one 50 laps longer than that. A lot of 2x2 in front of Johnson, obviously. Back in the corners way up with no practice in qualifying. Really trying to get a feel for the race car. Though he does have a run to the inside of the 126. Casey Mears, the 42 car, to his outside as well. Gotta hope the balance is gonna be there, and there he goes. Got a little tight. Made a slight bit of contact with Clint Boyer in the 2. I wanted to go with a little bit of a tighter setup for this one just because of how loose I was in the Truck Series race. Definitely not gonna drive 3 wide into the corner. A lot of stacking up going on in the middle and the back of the pack. Brian Vickers to the race lead. Hi, Stephen King 92 Hammer. Mark DeMars, thanks for tuning in. Slide job there by Johnson. He drove it in deep into turn 1, but he kind of let the car float up towards the outside just a little bit in the center of the corner, trying to clear that race car he was around. Now he's got to run on the number 50. A little bit of contact getting into the back of the 103. Johnson went up the racetrack. The 113 car got right back around him. Now Johnson bouncing off the wall off turn 4 as well. Man, very easy to step over the edge. Only 5 laps into this one, and Johnson's made contact with a few cars already. And a big run got to the outside of J.J. Yaley in the 18. I think the outside is going to be exactly where you're going to want to go to try to make passes. Johnson's car is way too tight up there. He bounces into the wall again off turn 4. Second straight lap, he did it. Gets to the inside of J.J. Yaley and makes the pass that time for 37th. Very narrow getting into turn 1 also. Something you got to be very, very careful with if you're Jimmie Johnson. And Johnson 3 wide. On the bottom, very close to that inside retaining wall into the first turn. Luckily, Jimmy kept it off the wall. I don't think Greg Biffle led it all at the very beginning of this race. I think Tony Stewart led the first few laps before Brian Vickers took the race lead a couple laps ago. Big run off turn 4 for Johnson. Quickly gets to the inside of another car. Contact as they're 3 wide into the first turn. Johnson tries to form himself back in line again. Mired around 28th. Slight contact with the back of Bernie Lamar. Johnson forcing his way underneath the 77 car. And Jimmy goes a little too far wide and up into the wall with Lamar. Both drivers losing a lot of positions in turns 1 and 2. He got hung up on Lamar, and once he made contact with him, he couldn't get off of him until they got into the wall. I was on the brakes forever there and just couldn't get the car to whoa up. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, you can really start to see a little bit of a breakaway on the track map. Towards the upper right-hand corner of the screen with where Vickers is at. In comparison to a lot of cars around him, Johnson locking the front tires up as he gets into that hard braking zone into turn 3. Just desperately trying to make some passes. As close to that inside wall as he can. As he takes it 3 wide into the first turn again with Ron Hornaday in the 152. And a handful of cautions in our truck race at Milwaukee, so I'd imagine we're going to see some yellows in today's race as well. Be shocked if we don't, really. Wow, 3 wide up on the outside off turn 4. Jimmy Johnson with a run on the bottom, and they're 4 wide at Milwaukee into turn 1. That was never going to work. There's a lot of contact. They all try to funnel out. I think Harvick ended up in the outside wall. Gosh, more contact getting into turn 3. They weren't even 4 wide anymore. Big move to the inside for Johnson. Some powers underneath Jeff Burton in the 21. His car bottoming out a little bit with slightly lower air pressure to start this race off. Johnson making a pass for 22nd. Wade Selinsky, thanks for tuning in. Tigers won. I've noticed a lot of the times I'm streaming, seems like the Tigers are winning a bunch of close games. I mean, I stream almost every day, but recently. Oh, Eric Crocker into the wall, into the 119, 4 wide again. Oh my goodness. They went wide, and that allowed for the 48, the 192 to get to the inside, and now Johnson making contact with the 192. These guys are all over the place right now. Dicey in the middle of the pack. Big block for Johnson on Crocker. Jimmy gets sideswiped getting into the first turn. Johnson's up to 16th. Already looks better than what Todd Bodine looked in that Truck Series race at Milwaukee a few weeks ago. Contact with Boris said that was on Johnson. Didn't really give the 9 a lot of room. Greg Biffle's lost a lot of track position in this race. He'll be on the outside again as Jimmy Johnson gets underneath and side drafts him on the front straightaway. Kyle Busch on the outside of Reed Sorensen. Next Busch Series driver is Clint Boyer. I know he made it into the final vote, I do believe, for this season. We'll see. Maybe he'll win, maybe he won't. Oh, contact with Busch. And up into the wall, and into another car. Then into the inside wall, obviously. A lot of contact further behind Johnson yet as well, getting into turn 1. Eric Crocker snuck through to 13th. Johnson almost allowed for Biffle to get around him. Biffle couldn't quite clear the 48 though, and he was stuck on the outside in that last corner. One thing though, this is a long race. Can't afford to damage the race car too early. Johnson underneath Crocker. Crocker not giving the 48 a lot of room. There was definitely some contact before Johnson pulled clear. Johnson will make the pass and move his way to 23rd. And Crocker overdrives turn 1. She goes wide. Johnson hasn't quite broken into the top 10 yet. Up to 12th. Sorensen misses his entry into 1 and 2. Johnson way too far down on the bottom though. Big mistake. Then made contact with the 192 and now trying to block Aaron Crocker before Crocker is able to cross over to the inside of Johnson. We got a good drive off of turn 4 there. And can't quite get down to the bottom yet. Oh. Yep, there's the mistake. Kenny Walsh just ran into the back of the 48 car after Johnson ended up in the wall. Tony Stewart is just taking the race lead back away from Brian Vickers that last lap as well. Oh, I didn't even realize that. Sorry for the... Yeah, the point standings isn't scrolling. You're right. Fix that when I get to the back stretch. I'll pause it. Maybe. So there's contact between Johnson and Biffle. Johnson slides clear. Alright, let me fix that for you guys. There we go. Yeah, the car is... It's tight through the first half of the corner, and then really right when I get off the exit of turn 2 or turn 4 for that matter, right off the exit of the corner, it wants to hang a left and get loose. So we roll in. Rolled in fine that time. Some of the time it'll just be tight, tight, tight. You get to the very exit and it gets a little loose. Oh, there's a lap car down to the bottom who has blown an engine, trying to get to pit road. It's the 10 of John Andretti. And look at how many cars Jimmie Johnson just passed on the outside as he gets to 6th. Kurt Busch into the inside wall before driving it off into turn 1. And Jimmie Johnson is trying to get inside the top 5 now underneath Denny Hamlin and Todd Kluver. Trying to outbrake Kluver. Staying on the inside. Clears Hamlin. Jimmie Johnson's up to 4th after being in, what, 13th place last lap? That worked out perfectly. I noticed on the track map they were starting to stack up from second on back. Tony Stewart's still quite a ways out ahead yet, but from second on back they were stacking up. And it's because there was the 10 of John Andretti down on the bottom and there was no apron in the middle of the corners on either end. Well, in turns 1 and 2 there is, but in 3 and 4 there isn't. There's grass there, so he had to stay on the bottom to limp his car back to pit road. And because that's the preferred lane around this racetrack, which is pretty much a one-groove track, everybody got stacked up. Johnson was all the way on the outside, anticipated it well, passed a ton of cars cleanly, and kept it off the wall on the outside as well. Great drive by the 48. And now he's trying to run down a couple more cars here. Yeah, 14th to 4th. Brian Vickers trying to get back into second place. That's going to open up the bottom for Jimmie Johnson to go 3 wide off turn 4. Will they make it into the first turn 3 wide? Johnson trying to hold his track position, a little bit of contact with his teammate. And Jimmie Johnson's up to second. And they're still side by side for third. Vickers underneath the 138. The 138 holds clear off turn 2. And Stewart, who has a big lead, now going to have Jimmie Johnson trying to pressure him. Still a long ways to go in this race, though. Definitely a lot of racing still to go. .2-second lead between Stewart and Johnson. 138 car starting to pull away from the 57 of Vickers just a little bit. And honestly, Jimmie Johnson could still be outside the top 10 if it wasn't for John Andretti blowing an engine right in front of the leaders. Tony Stewart had the wherewithal to miss him to the outside. But obviously when he moved up, everybody that was in line behind him was a little too late to move to the top, and they all got checked up. The car got away from me there in the middle of the corner. Stewart 3/10 quicker than Johnson that last lap with that mistake from the 48. And a little bit of a mistake driving a little too low in 1 and 2. I'll clip the grass. I'm all over the place. I got out of the groove 1 corner and now 3 corners in a row. Making some mistakes. Johnson blows the entry getting into turn 1. Stays in front of the 138 that time at least. How's the car working? I mean, it feels better. I'm just making mistakes on my own right. I'm trying to settle in a little more. Alternate through the different camera angles for the first time in the race today. And Tony Stewart's nowhere close to lap traffic either. So he has had a very easy time at the front of the field. If I had to guess, it's going to be a 2 pit stop race today. Should be able to go pretty close to around 100 laps on fuel. So definitely looking at 2 pit stops. And that would be for everybody. Clip the inside wall and then ricocheted into the outside wall. I did that a handful of times in the truck race. This is the first time I've done it here tonight in this Busch Series race. Doesn't look pretty, I'll tell you that much. Still about 3.3 seconds behind Stewart. Just like with Jimmie Johnson in the Cup Series, who hasn't won a Cup race yet, same thing kind of applies for Tony Stewart in the Busch Series, where he's led a lot of laps and just hasn't been able to get to victory lane. Although with Johnson in the Cup Series, he hasn't led in points. At least Tony Stewart has led in points. And in fact, currently is the points leader. But not by much. Johnson really, in all reality, not that far out of first, coming in third in the standings. The problem is Tony Stewart's leading all these laps. So it's going to be tough to close in a wide margin if you're Jimmie Johnson in this situation the way we're running right now. When he can put some clean laps together and hits his marks perfectly, he is a little bit quicker than Tony Stewart. It just took him so long to get up to second that obviously he's having a hard time trying to close now. And getting through traffic is going to be the hardest thing for Jimmie Johnson. Once he's starting to settle himself in a nice groove, really starting to pull away from the rest of the field behind him. So lap 48 right now, just getting to the halfway mark on fuel. So as of right now, I'm looking like I'm going to end up pushing it to lap 95 and then hit pit road at lap 95. Will be the strategy plan for right now, at least. Tony's caught the back of lap traffic. Now, this will allow Johnson to close the gap. But once Jimmie gets into traffic, though, that is where it is going to be interesting to see if he can actually hang on. Made it to lap 50. Ever get to watch the second game? What second game? Talk about the Tigers? Yeah, because they didn't play last night, did they? I haven't watched a singles Tigers game at all this year. I have no way of being able to watch it unless they're on like FS1 or something on the weekends. Or ESPN randomly during the week. True Assassin 86X, thanks for tuning in. Johnson driving it in really deep into turn 3. As flat as he entered the corner. Definitely had a little bit too much throttle input. It was a little too late to the braking. A lot of racing still to go, though. Johnson going to look to the outside of the 112. He's looking to the inside of the car up in front of both of them. Johnson's held up right now. Stays on the outside into turns 1 and 2. There's nowhere for Jimmie Johnson to go. This car's side by side. Jimmy looking low. Can drive it in really deep. He got by one of the two cars that were in front of him. Now he's still got to get by the 112. It's only 1.3 seconds off the lead. Looking to make a pass on the lap car. And pushes clear. Yeah, I have Hulu also. I just can't watch all the Tigers games. The NHL is carried through ESPN Plus, so I can literally watch any NHL game during the season. But that's also what how the media rights deal is with the NHL. It's not like that with basketball or baseball. So I can't really watch all the Pistons or Tigers games. I can watch any Red Wings game, though, being a Detroit sports fan. Three lap cars between the top two. Jimmie Johnson has closed the gap on Tony Stewart. Johnson to the outside of the 33 of Hornaday. Lap car's not giving up the bottom for Johnson to really try to make those moves. Should be way up towards the outside. Takes the undercut off turn 4. Beats the 126. Has him clear getting into turn 1. Still underneath Ron Hornaday, and he'll finally clear the 33 of Hornaday. Trying to catch up on that other 33 car, though, of Tony Stewart. It's getting closer. No lap cars now between the top two. Stewart dealing with a lap car off of turn 4. Lap 60, Johnson just ran his fastest lap, 27.806 on that last lap. Underneath Tony Stewart. Couldn't get the drive off, though. He tried to take it 3 wide. Didn't work. Contact with that lap car. And we'll take that first field pass of the race today. We'll go back as Brian Vickers in the 57. He's in 4th place right now. Again, as we are 60 laps in. Nobody anywhere around Vickers. Vickers 8.1 seconds behind Stewart. Phil Moore, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, somebody at work that's a racing fan, he mentioned to me something about EA Sports showing interest, or he saw a video on YouTube about it. I've heard rumors about it just from, you know, the YouTube community, but I haven't like looked into any. Even if I look into it, rumors are rumors until they actually become, you know, true. The thing with Motorsport Games is they have the rights, so I don't know how they would get out of the contract that they're in right now for EA. Like, I don't know if EA would have to buy them out, and if they did that, then they're gonna have to fork over a lot more money, and I don't think they're gonna want to do that for NASCAR. There may be certain sports games where they would be willing to do that. I just don't think NASCAR would be one of them. Alright, so we're driving as Kyle Busch. For the swap from Vickers. And Denny Hamlin and Kurt Busch right in front of Kyle Busch. Kyle looking to the inside of Kurt, off turn 4. Gets there for 6th. A little contact with his brother. Clears him into turn 1. And now gets a run on Denny Hamlin on the backstretch. Kyle Busch is inside the top 5 for the first time today. So all 3 Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolets are in the top 5. 4 wins for Hendrick so far on this Busch Series season. Got 3 for Jimmy Johnson and 1 for Kyle Busch so far. No wins yet for Brian Vickers. A lot of the season obviously still to go. Have had 4 different winners in the first 6 races. Johnson the only driver with more than 1 win. Kenny Wallace has a win at Bristol. We're just started getting through the lap traffic a little bit quicker than Johnson again. Johnson to the outside of Yaley into turn 1. Trying to power by the 18. And a tap into the wall. Finally drives by Casey Mears. Underneath JJ Yaley. EA would do a non-sim fantasy NASCAR game. I do like the fantasy tracks. I mean, it's not like you have to race with the fantasy tracks. I guess you did with the truck in the Busch series at the time, because it filled up basically any of the licensed tracks. that were not in the game at the time, like when they raced at Kentucky and Memphis. A lot of the standalone events. The only standalone events that they would have had on here would have been IRP in Milwaukee at the time. Any race in Montreal or Monterrey, Mexico, they wouldn't have had. Down to about a quarter tank of gas left at this point in the run. Jimmy Johnson going to work past Clint Boyer pretty quickly through turns 1 and 2. Johnson with a run on the outside of a 3-wide battle into turn 1. Didn't realize he was going to have a run on both of those cars. In contact with the 152 car. Johnson still stuck on the outside. This is working out quite as well as he would have hoped. It's only 1 second off the race lead, but he's stuck in traffic. I mean, as is Tony Stewart. Oh, wow, a lot of contact. Johnson and Menard off turn 2. Jimmy's car just a little too loose off the exit of the corner, so when he's got a car underneath him, very difficult to try to stay off of him. Found a hole just in front of Clint Boyer, but he overdrove the entry to turn 1, and Boyer will get right back underneath him again. Now he'll clear the 2. Takes a dive to the bottom. Oh, move the 152 up into the 11. That's one way to do it, I guess. Johnson makes the pass. Got to within 1 second of the lead, and now he's about 1.7 seconds back. They're getting caught in some pretty heavy lap traffic. Johnson locking the brakes up into turn 3. He is definitely doing what he can. Knows he's going to have to change these tires fairly soon. We should be getting into green flag pit stops not that far from now. I think John Andretti's still the only driver out of the race today. Any sort of an engine failure. Johnson closes on Tony Stewart. Stewart blocking. We'll drop back as Kyle Busch in the 5 again. Busch is in 5th place still, and he is about a half a track off the race lead right now. Johnson battling Tony Stewart side by side, but it looks like Stewart trying to hang on and potentially lead. Still, off the exit of turn 4, it is Jimmy Johnson who has just led his first lap of the day. So 5 bonus points for Johnson as he finally leads. Took 81 laps to get from last to first in this one. And we have not seen any pit stops yet tonight. One lap car right around Kyle Busch. Busch blew an engine in the last race. He actually went in as the points leader into race number 6 of the season. After that engine failure, he has fallen back a little bit in the standings. And we'll swap to Brian Vickers for the final time now. So he is in the 4th place position. And it sounds like we've got some of the leaders on their way to pit road. Jimmy Johnson being one of them. So Johnson, one of the first cars to pit at lap 83. 138 car staying out to take his first lead of the race. Brian Vickers already has 5 bonus points for leading earlier on. Vickers will stay out this time, as will the 138. We definitely know Brian Vickers will stay out the next time by as well. Actually kind of shocked that Jimmy Johnson was one of the first cars to pit. Took the lead for about 3-4 laps, then comes in for his first stop of the day. And we will swap back to Johnson. Tony Stewart still in front of him. NASCAR Vintage 17, thanks for tuning in. Johnson barely a lap down, so is Tony Stewart. Stewart's actually in the free pass position, right behind the leader, and never mind. The 138 coming in, so both Johnson and Stewart will get back on the lead lap, so if we were to get a caution for the first time today, right around right now at least. Johnson and Stewart will be back on the lead lap. Lap cars coming out of the pits down to the bottom of the racetrack. Johnson to the outside of the 117, who is coming out of the pit lane. Getting up to speed on the backstretch. A lot of contact off turn 4. Jimmy got squeezed in the middle of the corner, and then he got just a tad loose, and he didn't want to lift any extra there, and he about turned the 117 car middle of the front stretch. Actually surprised Johnson kept it off the wall. Stewart got back to the lead during the green flag pit stops a little bit quicker than Johnson was on pit road. It's a battle of who could get through the lap traffic the quickest currently. Kyle Busch on pit road. A little bit of contact. Johnson crowds Tony Stewart and takes the eventual race lead away from Stewart. Vickers in the lead, obviously, right now because he has stayed out of the pits a little longer. Johnson with the 3-wide dive into turns 3 and 4, getting by a lot of lap cars that time. Brian Vickers will pit this time. Johnson power sliding through 1 and 2. Third time he's done that when he's gotten all 4 tires down onto the apron. Especially the closer he gets to the exit of the corner. I believe Aaron Crocker led that last lap, which would have been her first lap led of the race during these green flag stops. And now Jimmy Johnson will cycle to the lead following the green flag pit stops. Stewart cycled out in front of him after Johnson went in a little bit ahead of the 33. But Johnson passed Stewart before the rest of the leaders hit pit road. And so Jimmy Johnson overall has cycled back out to the race lead, just as he cycled in. Well, I don't think... Oh, jeez. Big mistake there from Johnson, and Stewart's got to take the lead as a result. Jimmy got into the wall off turn 4. There's no way EA would be able to get the rights to Nazareth now. They had it at this time frame, but I don't think it was vacant at this time where now it is. So is there even an owner of the racetrack now? Or whoever would own the land would be who EA would have to go to get the licensing for the track. On the power slide, Johnson was trying hard to get underneath the 33, and he lost a little bit of ground. Pretty big run off the exit of turn 4 for Johnson. Wide entry into turns 1 and 2. Gets underneath Stewart. Side by side for the lead on the back straightaway. And Johnson will retake the lead. So Jimmy Johnson and Tony Stewart going back and forth right now for the lead. What, should buy Nazareth? Don't have that kind of money. So you'd have to renovate everything at the facility too before you would reopen it. It's more than just buying land. See, the thing with North Wilkesboro, SMI owned it this entire time, so they never sold it to anybody. As far as I know, I don't think they leased it to anybody either. It was just sitting with their ownership. They were just kind of letting it go for a while. Stewart with the dive into turn 3, gets to the inside of Johnson. Second time in this current battle. But that's the case, a little bit of contact there off turn 4. Johnson led that lap. But Tony Stewart putting up a little bit of a fight. Johnson trying to get back underneath the 33. Into turns 3 and 4. Johnson passes him cleanly. Right back. There you go. Battle tested. Both of these drivers. Some of the early season championship favorites. If Tony Stewart runs the full season, he's definitely got a shot at the championship. And his wins will come with how consistent he's been in the early going of the year. Same thing with Johnson in the Cup Series side of things, having 5 top 5s in the first 5 races of the season. He'll get his wins. But as long as Johnson's going to be competing for wins, he wants to keep Stewart out of victory lane as much as possible because there's a bigger point increment between first and second than any other position in the running order when it comes to points being awarded at the end of the race. And this is a season that's going to be graded off of consistency as it's a season-long points format. There's no playoff or chase format in all 3 series under custom schedule seasons. It's only 30 races, a little less than the actual Xfinity schedule now, and a little less than the 35 race season that they had in the Busch Series of Real Life in 2006. And Tony Stewart leading a ton of laps in the early going. Johnson now finally leading laps. They both have 5 bonus points in the race. 10 bonus points are on the line. Oh, Tony gets into Johnson. Hooks him down the track, and Johnson runs Stewart back up the racetrack again. He didn't appreciate that whatsoever. Stewart drove it in deep, got into the back of the 48, tried to move him. Now we'll get to the inside of him this time. Stewart trying to block. Johnson gets underneath him. Jimmy moving him. Johnson moving him right back. They were battling clean for so long before that. Can use the lap car as a pick. Gets by the 101 as well. Stewart just drove it right into the side of Johnson. And there goes Tony again to the inside. Clear. Now the lap car's down in the grass. Well, passing the grass for the 101 as he gets by Jimmy Johnson. Johnson loses a ton of time on Tony Stewart, as Stewart will retake the lead. Johnson trying to get right back by the lap car. And he will cleanly. Through turns 1 and 2. Locking those front tires up, trying to clear the 101 car into turns 3 and 4. Bounces off the wall as well. He's digging hard, trying to get back to Stewart. Pushed a tad too hard. Tony Stewart blocking. Johnson got a big drive off turn 4 that time. Looks to the inside of the 33. Johnson going to make the clean pass on Tony Stewart this time around. Big block. A little too soon on it, though. Stewart trying to get by the lap car, Boris said, in the number 9. Johnson locked the left front up again, trying to push hard into turns 3 and 4. Got to the inside of Stewart. Little side draft. Clears him. Just not able to drive away. Blocking Stewart on the back straightaway, trying to keep the 33 in his rear view. Johnson will lead this lap at the line. Johnson's probably led right around 20 laps today. I would guarantee that Stewart's probably led right around 60 or so. Jimmy's got a lot of catching up to do if he's going to want to lead the most laps as we get closer to the second half of this race. Still caution free as well. It's really just a 2-horse race for right now between Tony Stewart and Jimmy Johnson. And John Andretti still the only car out of the race with an engine failure. We'll have more NASCAR 07 on the channel tomorrow. A Cup Series race at Pocono. That will start at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night. And that will be a 50% race, so just a 100-lap Cup race at Pocono tomorrow night on the channel for NASCAR 07. Matthew Dordo Bruno, thanks for tuning in. So Johnson's first stop is at lap 83. Completely flatlined the corner, getting into turns 3 and 4 there. Jimmy overdrove turn 1. Too worried about driving out of the rear view that Tony Stewart's going to attempt to pass again. Stewart clears. Johnson, though, back to the inside. And again gets right back around Tony Stewart. Perfect crossover. Tony never let a lap in that transition. Charges hard on the entry into the corner. Jimmy's pretty good with beating Stewart back to the gas more often than not, but Tony Stewart definitely drives it in a lot deeper on corner entry, which is why he has been able to get to the back bumper and move Johnson out of the way a couple different occasions. Johnson wiggles. Johnson gets by the 110. Lock the front tires getting into turn 1. Made a little bit of contact with that 110 car behind him. This next lap car holding Jimmy up. We'll be halfway at the start-finish line. 250 laps down, 250 still to go at the Milwaukee Mile tonight. Johnson trying to get by the 110. Locks the front tires up a little bit. Gave up a lot of the bottom. Tony Stewart is there. Big block by Jimmy Johnson as he holds on to the lead. Stewart drives it into the inside wall. Oh, hard into the outside wall with a lap car as well. And Tony Stewart overdrove it, I think, trying to get back to Johnson's back bumper after Johnson threw a risque block on him. And now Jimmy's setting sail. No caution. We stay green. We have not had a caution-free Busch race. We've cycled through green flag pit stops. Johnson's got a 2.5 second lead now. And that has really opened up the gap between positions 1 and 2. A lot of clean air in front of the 48. Definitely takes the pressure off of him for right now. But obviously a lot of race still to go also. Halfway through the fuel run right now. Remember that it was Tony Stewart leading at Michigan when he ended up getting loose going into turn 1 on the second to last, or turn 3 rather, on the second to last lap of the race as they were coming to the white flag. The guy in second who capitalized to win that race was Jimmy Johnson, who only led a handful of laps throughout the course of that race. And then you fast forward to this race here today, and it's all Tony Stewart and Jimmy Johnson. It has been a very competitive and even battle between the two, so much to the fact that we really don't know who's got the faster car between the 48 and the 33 because they're that equal. They've been able to pass each other back and forth. And outside of Brian Vickers, who was, of course, one of Jimmy Johnson's teammates at the very beginning of this race, nobody else has been able to actually pass Tony Stewart at all today. And really, when Vickers got around him on the start of the race, it was also on the initial restart. We were only about 5-6 laps into the race, so everybody was still bunched close together. Once Tony retook that lead away from Vickers, though, he really started to set sail before Johnson ran him down during that first fuel run. Bigger overdrive the corner that time through 3 and 4. All 4 tires down on the grass in turns 3 and 4. No wonder he got loose. Tony Stewart's definitely closing back in, though. He's only a second off the lead. Fell about 2.3 seconds back. In about 8 laps, he has really ran down the 48. Maybe a tenth quicker than Johnson that last lap. Still well over 100 to go. Everybody has to make one more pit stop before the end of this race. I know Johnson could go longer than 83 laps on fuel. That was just when he pitted the first time. Everybody should make it on one stop. They all went past 75 laps into the run. Lap 81 was about the first lap I remember seeing any sort of green flag pit stop starting. Stewart has caught that 101 car. Caused the 101 to lose Jimmy Johnson just a little bit. Tony Stewart about 2 to 3 car lengths behind Johnson into turn 1 on lap 140 of 250. Pretty tight battle once again. Tony Stewart just a little bit wide that last time. Johnson maybe a tenth quicker than Stewart. A lot of that was because Stewart seemed to have gotten tight once he got closer behind the 48 car in the middle of turns 3 and 4. Stewart keeps going a little bit wider in turns 3 and 4. Maybe he's doing that intentionally to try to catch a little clean air on the nose. Oh my gosh, Johnson way too low and into the wall. Tried to side draft Stewart. Stewart gets to the lead. That was all on Johnson making that mistake. Tony Stewart will capitalize and retake the race lead off of turn 4 to lead another lap. A big block by Stewart on the front stretch as Jimmy tried to get right back after him again. Looking low off turn 2. Johnson to side draft Stewart. Into turns 3 and 4. Johnson gonna make the clean pass on Tony Stewart. Cleared him. Tony led 1 lap in that transition and Johnson retook the lead the following lap. Led that time at the line. Just for a change of pace, I would like at least 1 caution-free race at each series. We've had 2 in the truck series, one 50%, one 100%. We haven't had any in the Busch series. We haven't had any 50% races yet in the Busch or the Cup series, but on this Busch series season, though, This is definitely the furthest we've gone into a race caution-free, percentage-wise, compared to how many laps we started with. Tony Stewart challenging for the lead again. Johnson on the outside. Tony Stewart going to be the one to lead this lap at the start-finish line. Johnson trying to overtake him. Back to the inside. Ran him a bit off the bottom, but he did race him cleanly through 1 and 2, and Jimmy Johnson retakes the lead again from Tony Stewart. Stewart sailed it off into turns 3 and 4, and he actually gets the car for the most part to hook 2/3 of the way through the corner down on that white line before finally drifting up a little bit tight. Surprised he held on that far into the corner. Long straightaways, very tight turns around this 1 mile racetrack, very similar to New Hampshire. A lot more narrow, though, off the exit of the corners than New Hampshire, which therefore creates even less passing opportunities. But the 48 to 33 have had no problems passing anybody today, except for lap traffic from time to time. But for the most part, they're able to get by each other pretty equally. I'd say Johnson has been a little bit more controlling of the clean air than Tony Stewart, when Jimmy has been leading laps. We'll have 100 laps to go at the start-finish line this time by. $150 down, 100 to go. Pretty fast race pace with no cautions in this one, I will say. This is one of the longest Busch Series races of the season. As far as elapsed time is probably going to go. Really, only about an hour, 10 hour, 15 minutes into this race. Already 100 laps left. Johnson gave up a lot of the bottom on corner entry. Stewart with a run and a block by Johnson. All the way down on the inside of the track. Tony tries to move him. But Johnson holds on to the lead again. Tagged from behind. Stewart's trying to move Jimmy Johnson, getting into turn 3 each of the last 2 laps. But Johnson has not budged either time. Johnson's plan is going to be to stay out of the pits as long as he could go during this run. Johnson pushed pretty wide most of the way through the corner. Another massive block on top of Stewart. And at least another lap, he's going to hold on to lead. As if you couldn't tell, Jimmie Johnson was desperate to try to lead as many laps as he can over Tony Stewart, especially with how many laps he's led during the second fuel run. Because the first fuel run, he obviously didn't take the lead until about 4 laps left until he pitted. He has led far more than Stewart during this run. So it is slowly starting to even out as far as who could potentially lead the most laps today. And Johnson desperately does not want to give it up. He wants the 10 bonus points, and he wants to win. And if there's one guy that can't get 10 bonus points, it would be Stewart, with him being the points leader. We are seeing the start of green flag pit stops once again. If Stewart decides to try to short pit, he should be able to cycle out ahead of Johnson at least during green flag pit stops. Maybe the way to go for Stewart. It's going to take a little pressure off Johnson to at least leading up to the 48's pit stop. About 89 laps to go. Stewart had a big run into turn 1, actually took to the outside rather than trying to move Johnson out of the way. And it looks like the 119 car gonna hold Stewart up a little bit. The 119 was coming out of the pits down on the bottom of the track on the back straightaway. Stewart couldn't clear him getting into turn 3. Johnson did. Johnson stays ahead and tries to pull ahead just a little bit more on Stewart. Scrape into the wall off turn 2 is not going to help Johnson pull away, though, I'll tell you that much. That was a mistake. Stewart trying to get back by the 119 again. 0.6 of a second lead for Johnson. Tony Stewart still hasn't pit. Johnson and Stewart pitted the same lap during the first green flag stops back on lap 83. 83 laps from then would be lap 166, so I'm going to assume Stewart will stay out this time by and then pit the following time. Tony will stay out after he passes the 119 that last lap. 85 laps to go. And honestly, Tony Stewart could come into the pits really any given lap from now on. And Tony stays out again. Maybe he's trying to stretch as far as he can as well, just to stay on the same pace as Johnson, in case we get that first caution of the race during green flag pit stops. Johnson lapped the 109. Just a little bit wide getting into turns 3 and 4. A couple lap cars up in front of Johnson pitting, so much more clean air for the 48. The 33 stays out again. The plan will be to pit at lap 171 for Jimmie Johnson. So lap 171 will be the planned pit stop for the 48. Stewart stays out at least one more lap. Stewart again staying out. So both Tony Stewart and Jimmy Johnson going further on their fuel run this time than what they did the last time. Johnson staying out again. And so does Tony Stewart. Right at the tail end of this run, though, Jimmy Johnson slowly pulling away from Stewart now. So it's about a 7 to an 8/10 of a second lead. Jimmy Johnson got to go one more lap to lap 172. Tony Stewart stays out again. 79 laps to go. And I'm gonna go one more. Really pushing it. I'm just scared to pit because Tony Stewart keeps staying out. Again, Stewart stays out. Kyle Busch is in. 8/10 of a second lead for Jimmy Johnson over Tony Stewart. But Johnson will pit now with 68 laps to go this time by. Sorry, 78 laps to go this time by. Doesn't want to risk running out of fuel. And it will be a 4-tire stop for Johnson as he makes his way to pit road. No adjustments for the 48. Tony Stewart will stay out at least one lap longer. He'll lead another lap by leading that lap at the line, and however many more laps he stays out, but the 48 is in for his final stop of the night. By 83 laps the first run. This run he ends up going about 90 laps. So he'll definitely be able to make it 77 laps to the, 77 laps to the finish. Final stop. I'm doing pretty good, by the way, Matthew. Hanging in there. It's been kind of a rough week. I give myself the benefit of the doubt by saying I'm good, but that's because nobody wants to hear me complain. So. Tony Stewart pitted just one lap after Jimmy Johnson. I would imagine that Johnson should be able to cycle back to the lead with that being the case. Brian Vickers leads for right now. He stayed out longer than anybody else through the first set of green flag stops. This will be the third or fourth different time that Vickers will have led today. And now Vickers is on his way in this time. Johnson pushed a bit wide through 3 and 4. Kyle Busch still on the track. I believe this is the first time Kyle Busch has led today. Johnson to third, getting by Vickers, who just cycled off of pit road. Kyle Busch still has to pit. Stays out at least one more lap. So that means all 3 Hendrick cars will have led today, with Kyle Busch leading for the first time during the second and final green flag stops of the race. And actually, Kyle Busch might have short pitted because he has scored 4 seconds ahead of Johnson, unless he was that close to the tail end of the field. Which I'm not going to lie, is a little bit confusing. I mean, Johnson's pit stop itself wasn't slow. Oh boy, 101 just ran right into the back of the 48. Derek Booth, thanks for tuning in. Ryan Jensen, thanks for tuning in also. Don't see me as a wrestler. Hey, I've got the height at least. I'll give myself that. I've got the championship belt too. Kind of making some errors driving the race car since leaving pit road. I feel like I'm moving around a lot more than I was before. Feels like the car's floating around quite a bit more. Johnson's still about 4 seconds behind Kyle Busch. Trying to figure out how Kyle Busch cycled to the lead during green flag pit stops. I think Tony Stewart cycled ahead of Jimmy Johnson as well. Busch had to have been so far behind. It's interesting, I'll tell you that much. Yeah, exactly. The garage driver doesn't count as a usage. Oh, they'd all beat me up. I'm too nice. And if we're talking like an actual fight, I would get the crap beat out of me. Edge has years of experience on me. There's no pro wrestler out there I don't want to say no pro wrestler I can go toe to toe with. I feel like Hornswoggle will be pretty easy to take on. So someone of that nature. Someone I have like an extreme size advantage on. What is a garage driver anyway? You're able to swap the garage driver out into your starting lineup before the end of stage 2. So if somebody in your starting lineup like blows an engine or something, or your garage driver is performing better than that driver throughout the course of the race, or then you can swap them in, but you have until the end of stage 2 to do it. Once stage 2 is complete, then it locks, so whoever's in your garage you can't take out of your garage at that point. Jimmy Johnson 2 seconds off the race lead. Still scored in third. A lot of contact off of turn 2. This 191 car. Caution free as we have 61 laps to go in tonight's race at the Milwaukee Mile. And yes, you heard that right, caution free so far through 190 laps. Quite a few yellows in the truck race here, but none in this Busch Series race. Kyle Busch has not led this whole race until he cycled into the lead following green flag pit stops on this final stop of the day. Jimmy Johnson sitting right behind Denny Hamlin now on the front straightaway. Boy, into turn 1. Johnson going a bit wide. Trying to get back down to the bottom lane, and he does. Battling pretty hard through the lap traffic there. Can't quite make a move underneath Hamlin. Ain't NASCAR without cautions. There's been caution-free races in NASCAR. It's just been a long time. Hamlin making a little bit of contact with the lap car. Held up a couple of the drivers there. Johnson looking low. It's 3 wide on the inside of the 20. What a pass made by Johnson. And there's still 3 wide behind him off of turn 4 as well. Johnson 1.2 seconds off the lead. Tony Stewart still in second. He's trying to run down Kyle Busch. Clint Boyer going to give the 48 of Jimmy Johnson quite a bit of room to get underneath and get around him as Johnson clears him off of turn 2. Still don't know how Johnson cycled all the way back to third. For one, I don't know how Busch got to first through green flag pit stops, and I don't know how Johnson fell as far back as he was. He was 4 seconds off the lead from Kyle Busch. Busch had to have pitted before the 33 and the 48. I don't know exactly how many seconds Johnson was behind the 33 of Stewart, but Johnson was about 0.8 of a second ahead of Stewart when Jimmy pitted, and Stewart pitted a lap after him. So you'd imagine that extra lap of fresher tires should have helped the 48. Whatever the case is, still have 54 laps to go for Johnson to try to compete for the win here. Johnson gets to the inside of the 42. Casey Mears. And he'll get by him into turns 3 and 4. Honestly, for it to be a caution-free race and the top 2 are that close together, really the top 3 about to be within a half a second of each other. Johnson closes the gap off turn 4. 200 laps down at the start-finish line this time by. We'll have 50 laps still to go. I believe Johnson has led more laps than Stewart in this race, with Busch not leading until now. He's definitely not going to have a chance of trying to lead the most at all. So with Kyle Busch leading, it's helping Jimmy Johnson in the most laps led category to try to get 10 bonus points today. Ron Hornaday, one of Tony Stewart's teammates, riding around on the outside. Lap cars are holding up the top two, and the 48 of Johnson is right there. Big dive in the middle of the corner for Johnson as he gets underneath Stewart off of turn 4. Trying to pull away from a potential side draft. He just ran his fastest lap of the day at 27.8 flat, and Johnson's up to second. Stewart stuck on the outside. Jimmy now to the inside of Busch for the lead. And Jimmy Johnson clear off turn 4. 48 laps to go, and the 48 is back in the lead. Oh, Busch! Drove it deep. Couldn't actually get to the lead, though. Johnson led that lap at the line. Jimmy looking to get it back. Oh my gosh. A lot of bottom open, a big dive as well for the 48. Did get it to stick. Johnson never officially lost the lead in that battle with the 5 of Busch. And now Tony Stewart's going for second. It was Stewart and Johnson who battled throughout the first 2/3 of this race. And Kyle Busch here in the late going is proving that he is pretty fast also. He qualified a lot deeper in the field. I mean, Johnson started at the tail end, didn't even qualify for this race. Remember, it took 81 laps before Jimmy Johnson took the lead at the start of the day, so Stewart has led quite a few laps. A little bit in between the time that Johnson has led. I'd probably say Stewart's led over 80 laps today. I like to think Jimmy Johnson's led right around 100, if not more. He's kind of pulling away, though, since Kyle Busch and Tony Stewart started to battle a little harder with each other. 27.758 that last lap for Johnson. That was another one of his quickest laps of the race. 2 of the last, 5 laps now he's ran his fastest. How is it that at the end of the race I seem to run just a little bit harder? Pushing a little bit harder, and when we get it to stick, it is ridiculously fast. It doesn't seem like it matters what track we go to for that to be the case. If we have good long run handling, it's definitely a battle on a consistent basis. 40 laps to go at the line. I think Damar Hamlin should play again. I mean, it was just like a freak thing. If the doctors clear him again, I don't see why, you know, he shouldn't play. I mean, if doctors aren't clearing him, obviously he can't play, but if he has the option to, still could. Obviously, that was something major that happened, but luckily, I don't think he's got any long-term ramifications from that incident. Cleared the play? Yeah, he'll play. I mean, I know it's a head injury, you know, versus, you know, a heart, you know, injury, I guess, to a certain extent. But, I mean, Ryan Newman's 2020 Daytona 500 crash didn't do him in, so he still came back and raced for a couple more years, so I wouldn't rule out, or I should say he raced one more year. He raced the rest of that season, then the next season after, but yeah, I don't think DeMar's done playing football. It's a little different with like a Tua situation in my eyes. I think he will play, but when you have like repetitive injuries to the same internal organ, that's where it kind of gets, you know, it's like how far do you want to push the issue or really start to affect you in your later years. But having just, you know, one pure random instant, yeah, he'll be okay. I'm not a doctor by any means, but they already cleared him though, so obviously they know more than I do, and if they're cleared him, yeah, they'll play. Kyle Busch retaking the lead here in the late going. Oh my gosh. Got really loose there off turn 4, and Jimmy Johnson ran right into the back of him. Jimmy wants to win this race bad. Hendrick Motorsports can get a 1-2 finish out of it. That'd be great. Johnson leads that lap at the line. Underneath the 5 of Kyle Busch. Johnson clears Busch off turn 2. And we'll see how much he'll be able to try to block Tony Stewart. I believe somebody else just blew an engine and made their way to pit road. Down to 31 laps to go. Halfway out of fuel at this point in the fuel run at the end of this race. Flipping to the grass there on the backstretch for Jimmy Johnson. Trying to give himself as much clearance as he can as he tries to pass the 50 car of Danny O'Quinn Jr. Yeah, and a top 10 for Chase at the end of that race. Honestly, that impressive run he had at the very end of the race that day, I think that just went to prove that he's back and he's ready and more than capable of winning a race, especially at the speed Hendrick's shown this year. I think Chase still makes the playoffs. Johnson just ran another quickest lap of the race. This is a 27.669. That would have been that last lap. Johnson under the 117. Jimmy getting through lap traffic a little bit better than the rest of the leaders behind him. Kyle Busch and Tony Stewart continue to battle, and Jimmy Johnson's really pulling away from the second and third place cars now. Big power slide there, but Johnson got too much of the apron. All that did was allow Kyle Busch and Tony Stewart to try to reel Jimmy back in again. He had right around a 1 second lead and was pulling away until that mistake. So he overdrove 1 and 2 that last time by. 26 laps to go. Put a lap car between the top two again, though. So he gets right back by the 117. Now that 117 car kind of holding up the traffic behind the 48. And with 25 laps to go in the race, Jimmy Johnson has finally just clinched the most laps led over Tony Stewart and Kyle Busch, who are the drivers who led the second and third most laps and are currently running second and third behind the 48. With Stewart leading the second most today, Busch the third most, and then Brian Vickers led maybe a dozen laps, if not a little less than that, in the very early going. Now, we are still caution-free with 24 laps to go. This could be the first caution-free Busch race on NASCAR 07 on the channel. The way things are running now, it's looking like that could very well be the case. No lap cars between any of the top three drivers on the racetrack. Johnson's got a 0.7 of a second lead. He's starting to slowly pull away again. I think Kyle Busch is probably holding Tony Stewart up a little bit. I think Tony's a bit quicker than the 5. He just can't get around him, and Johnson pulling away. Oh boy. Contact car off of turn 4. Kevin Harvick, last car in the lead lap in the 29. Followed by Jeremy Mayfield and then Bernie Lamar, who's already 1 lap down, I believe. Johnson, a little contact with Harvick. Kyle Busch 0.2 quicker than Johnson that last lap. Kyle pulling back away from Stewart a little bit. Should be taking a little bit more time trying to get through some of these lap cars now, as he made slight contact with Jeremy Mayfield off of turn 2 as well. I can't remember exactly where New Hampshire's at on the custom schedule season. $19 to go at the line. Kyle Busch is right there on the back of Jimmy Johnson. Johnson accelerates well off turn 4. One more lap car for the 48. That'd be the 77 of Bernie Lamar. And then there will be a little bit more clean air for Johnson. Like to get by Lamar as quickly as he can. Johnson under Lamar on the front stretch. Side by side into turn 1. Clean air now in front of the 48. "17 laps remaining. 4/10 of a second lead for Johnson over Busch. This could be the 5th win for Hendrick Motorsports. Only between the 48 and the 5 as well in this Busch Series season through the first 7 races. Only Mark Martin and Kenny Wallace, the non-HMS Chevys, to go to victory lane on the Busch Series season. Though in the Cup Series, Hendrick Motorsports with 4 cars versus the 3 in the Busch Series. With 4 cars in the Cup Series, and none of them have won in the first 5. Although Johnson has had 5 top 5s to start the season there. But Kyle Busch putting a lot of pressure on JJ getting into 3 and 4. Still 15 laps to go. Busch going to the outside. A little wide into turns 1 and 2. I don't want these guys to get to battling yet if they could help it, because if they start to battle too hard, Tony Stewart's going to close in 3rd. On to 14 laps to go. I don't know if Jimmy Johnson's going to catch any more lap cars before the end of the race. I will say Tony Stewart's definitely running out of time to try to win this race on his own. He desperately needs to get by the 5 of Kyle Busch if he wants any chance of trying to catch Jimmy Johnson. I think he's got the speed to do it. After clinching the most laps led with 25 laps to go as well for Johnson, this would be an awesome max points day. Also want Kyle Busch to try to stay in 2nd for the points, because Tony Stewart is the points leader. 5-point difference between finishing 2nd and 3rd. So if Tony can finish 3rd, that would be big for the 48, and the 5 for that matter, when you consider the fact that he was the points leader going into the last race at Michigan before he blew an engine in the early going of that one. 10 laps remain at the Milwaukee Mile. We are very close to a caution-free Busch Series race for the first time this season. It's pretty cool you've been allowed twice. I definitely want to get up to New Hampshire. I haven't been there yet for a NASCAR race. I'd like to go one of these years. Busch and Stewart battling hard for second. Tony just can't get alongside of Kyle yet. Jimmie Johnson has about an 0.8 of a second lead. It's slowly growing. Johnson power slides a little bit through turns 1 and 2. Got a little too much of the apron there. Busch and Stewart reel him in just a little bit. Johnson can just go back to setting his pace again. He'll be all right. A lot better through 1 and 2 that time. A lot more grip. Six to go. Johnson really wants to see that white flag. No cautions on the final lap in this game. Jimmy wants to see this thing go caution-free. Be amazing if he can get 4 wins out of the first 7 races. And the fact that he'd do that and he still wouldn't be the points leader. And a lot of it, honestly, was just that season opener at Daytona, where he finished a lap down in 38th. That's still the big difference in him, and more than likely having the points lead if it wasn't for that bad finish. And the fact that he still hasn't had the points lead yet through 7 races. Took 8 races to get to the points lead in the Truck Series. Maybe it takes that long from the Busch side. It's not a great corner that time. Johnson got a little bit wide on entry. It stayed wide towards the exit. Kyle Busch, Tony Stewart a little bit quicker than Johnson at last lap. Johnson going to have to pick it back up just a little bit more, although Johnson accelerated really well off turn 4. 0.6 of a second lead, 3 laps to go. There's no chance for Busch to get to the back bumper of Johnson with how far back he is at right now, going into one corner, so that's a nice gap. It's a comfortable gap for Jimmy. It's not a big gap, but it's comfortable. Doesn't want anybody to get to his bumper. Tony Stewart's tried the bump and run on him for the lead a few times today. I don't know if Kyle would do it to a teammate, but Tony Stewart would do it if he gets a chance. 2 to go. Johnson about 0.2 quicker than Kyle Busch and Tony Stewart that last lap. Stewart just cannot pass the 5. Hasn't been able to this entire run. Busch cycled out of the pits in front of him. They'll be coming to the white flag. 1 lap to go for Jimmie Johnson. Our first caution-free Busch race of the season will be official at the start-finish line this time by. Jimmie Johnson dominating for the most part the second half of this race today. Not necessarily by margin of lead, but by the lap sled counter. Not cruising his way to victory by any means, but a solid win. No pressure in the final laps. Jimmie Johnson wins his 4th race of the Busch season at Milwaukee. His 5th career Xfinity win. And just 7 cars finish on the lead lap here today. That's it. Alrighty. 1-2 finish for Hendrick Motorsports in their 3rd of the 3 cars, finishing 4th of Brian Vickers. Solid night for that organization. 119 laps led from last to first for Jimmie Johnson today, just under half the race. 21 lead changes in all, no cautions. Margin of victory 0.6 6:95 seconds, just under 2 hours. Total time of today's race of 1 hour, 58 minutes, and 58 seconds. And the average race speed was 126.07 miles per hour. Kyle Busch led 27 laps, finishing in second. Tony Stewart led the second most laps, finishing third after starting second, leading 69 laps today. Brian Vickers ends up finishing with 30 laps led in fourth. Smith rounds out the top 5 with 3 laps led. Eric Crocker led 1 lap during green flag pit stops, finishes in 6th. Kenny Wallace ends up finishing 7th as the last car in the lead lap. Kennedy 8th. Kurt Busch 9th. And Denny Hamlin rounds out the top 10. Our pole sitter Greg Biffle led the first lap of the race. That was it. He finished a lap down at 15th. We'll see who all DNF'd at today's race today. Not much. John Andretti, Paul Menard, and Ron Hornaday were the only drivers that blew an engine today. So just 3 DNFs in today's Busch Series race. So tomorrow night, NASCAR 07 at Milwaukee. Or sorry, tonight we were at Milwaukee. Tomorrow, NASCAR 07 at Pocono. And that will be our 6th race of the Cup Series custom schedule season. And also, it will be not only our 6th race of the year, but it'll be the first 50% race of the season. So only 100 laps at Pocono tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our next Busch Series race will be the Kroger 200 at IRP, Indianapolis Raceway Park, and now known as Lucas Oil Raceway in Indy. So we'll go short track racing once again for this Busch Series season. Tony Stewart still has the lead in points. Jimmy Johnson is now second after moving up 1 spot. He'll be 22 points out of first after a max points day today. And Kyle Busch, from an engine failure 2 races ago to a runner-up finish today, he is only 90 points out of first, and a big gap back to Matt Kenseth in 4th. Brian Vickers is 5th. J.J. Haley 6th. Kenny Wallace, so on and so forth. So that's going to be it for tonight's stream. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like and subscribe for more daily NASCAR content. I will see you guys tomorrow night on the channel, 8 p.m. See ya. Have a good rest of your Tuesday night, everybody.